No.
Okay. So then I think we'll just wait for a little so that way they start, if anybody starts rolling in, and then we'll get started then. Okay?
Okay. Sounds good.
Excited for all the questions, Dr. Wong?
No, not really. Why would I be excited? I do this because I'm told I should be doing this.
Oh, don't say that. They're going to think we're holding you hostage.
Well, that's what it is.
It's not. You like working with students. It's okay. Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me? I hope they can.
Well, you got some people on there.
I know. Okay, they
Good
can hear.
morning,
Okay.
everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, so I think we have a couple of people now. So would you like to get started?
Sure.
Okay.
Happy to.
Okay. So for our very first question, would you please introduce yourself to the students who might have not met you yet, and what's your role in the Child Development Department?
Sounds good. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Eugene Wong. I'm one of the faculty in the Child Development Program. And I was formerly with the psychology department, but when the two majors became separate, I was moved from psychology to child development because my background is children's development, exceptional children's development, and neuropsych assessment.
Okay, and so now we're going to do a little icebreaker. So if you could instantly master like one random talent, but non-academic, what would it be?
Race car driving.
Race car driving? Why race car driving?
I've just always had this thing about driving fast, and obviously we can't really do it on the freeways or the streets. So I would love to be able to get onto a track on a regular basis and just drive cars fast.
Okay. I'm sure you could do it now.
What do you mean?
You could get trained.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there are tracks available where you can take your car and learn to drive, and they would have instructors work with you to know how to manage your car and handle your car without crashing it and so on. So, yes, there are those schools available.
So I'm sure you could master that random talent one day.
I hope to do that, above and beyond what I do here.
Okay, so let's get started. So what first sparked your interest in developmental psychology?
I think for me, the interest in developmental psych really grew out of my experience as an undergraduate at UCLA. There I was in this off-campus program where we were at a state developmental disabilities institution where we did our coursework, we did our internship, and we did our research. And so it was this truly immersive kind of experience where we lived on the campus. The UCLA faculty came to the campus. UC Riverside faculty came to the campus and mentored us in the research, did the courses, and then, of course, we did our internship hours with all of the clients on the hospital campus. Mm-hmm. And so in having that experience for 2 years, it really sort of opened the door to understanding the critical variables, the critical factors that play a role in children's development. And when things don't quite go right and there's atypical development, how do we address those things? And that sort of evolved into graduate school and now what I do as a professional.
Thank you. So I know you wear a lot of different hats. So you're a professor, you're a psychologist, a researcher, and a mentor. So which of those roles has taught you the most about yourself?
I think the role that's taught me the most about myself is the mentor role. Because there I'm working directly with you all. I'm working with you as students, and all of you have different experiences coming into the university setting, and all of you have different goals beyond the university setting. So for me, there's a lot of learning that goes on simply because I get to interact with individual students, their goals, their histories, their lived experiences, And in trying to then support that particular student's movement to the next step, whatever that next step is, it's this amazingly sort of rich experience over the year, 2 years, 3 years that I get to work with most students before they move on. And in that sense, there's tremendous growth, right? The other stuff, the professional side of teaching and doing research, okay, well, great. We're contributing to, what we know about specific research topics and so on. But it's really the students that make the difference in terms of, wow, you all go on and represent the university, you go on and represent the major. And in that sense, it's one of the best things I could possibly be doing.
Thank you. You heavily focus on social emotional development and cognitive abilities like working memory and executive function. Why are these areas so crucial for student success?
So a lot of that just derives from the work that I've done in a K-12 setting for a lot of years, where we just know that when it comes to student success, there is this combination of variables, factors that have to come together. There's of course, the home environment. And of course, there are the cognitive things that you mentioned. There are the social, emotional, and self-perception things that have to come together. And so for me, I've always looked at the school experience as sort of a holistic thing, that it's not simply about brains and being able to have the strongest cognitive abilities, and that's what guarantees your success in school. A lot of times it's that you have certain cognitive abilities that you come into the setting with, but then it's these self-perceptions and this the social emotional strength that students have that really sort of enhances those cognitive abilities. And it's the combination of those things that actually pushes the kiddo forward in a K-12 setting in terms of their academic success, in terms of their engagement with school. And so for me, I've always just looked at those two things as intricately tied together, and that it's not possible to say, well, it's just one or the other, but it's really this sort of holistic approach to saying this is what supports children in terms of their academic experiences. And I think the same is true even for all of you here as university students. You're all grown up, but it's still the same thing, right? You all obviously have the brains because you're at a California State University institution. Had to have something to get in here, but beyond that, it's really critical that we sort of have that social emotional strength, the social emotional support to sort of have you move forward in whatever the next steps are.
Thank you for sharing. Your research often centers on executive function and working memory. So why are these areas especially important for students early and middle childhood?
So that's a lot of the developmental research where, there's many years of research now that have looked at things like executive function and their crucial role. And the thing that we sort of know about these executive functions is that developmentally, they really don't mature until our mid-late 20s, but they're critical to success in terms of school-age children, junior high children, high school children, and so on. And so in that sense, knowing that developmentally they take a while to mature, I've always sort of focused on, given that we know that they're not mature as we're going through K-12, it's really critical for external agents to have some role, whether it's the teachers or the parents or tutors, other school personnel who might have interaction with students, to really sort of support the executive function, because it's not developmentally something that is going to be strong as a kiddo is going through school. And if it's not strong and supportive of academic performance, you can sort of see how kiddos might sort of struggle in school. So in that sense, I've always focused on those things as a thing that we as adults, as professionals, can really sort of say, we're going to take a role in working on supporting for students.
Okay. Do you feel like for supporting them in their executive function and working memories, is it more crucial to target it early in childhood development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the takeaways that we always talk about in developmental work. Early intervention is always better than intervening later, after the fact, and so on. I think that's a lot of what drives the work that I do, a lot of the work that the research assistants are involved in. We focus on sort of addressing things that we know are critical to school and school performance and academic engagement in sort of a preventative way. We're trying to build these skills so that a student who we know developmentally doesn't necessarily have these skills yet have success early on in their lives, as opposed to, wow, we're trying to fix something, so to speak, but now they're in the upper grades or they're in junior high or high school, which is not to say it's not doable. It's just a bigger challenge versus sort of taking that preventative approach and saying, let's work on these things early on, build them to the greatest ability that we can, and it allows the kiddos to do the best they can.
So I know you mentioned of your research, and so I know your recent publications has focused on computerized cognitive training. So for those of us who aren't psychologists, what exactly is that, and why should we be paying attention to it?
So computerized cognitive training has been around actually for many years. It just hasn't moved into the mainstream in terms of it receiving attention. But I think the easiest way to think about computerized cognitive training is that it is just gamified cognitive tasks. So much like if we were to go to the gym and we wanted to lift weights to build muscles. Well, one way to make it more appealing, so to speak, might be to do it as a small group and to have a coach work with that group and to sort of go through a set regimen of weight training exercises and so on. Well, if you sort of take that idea and apply it to cognitive tasks, if we gamify them, much like it would look with a video game, well, it's sort of the same idea, right? This cognitive task that might not be all that engaging could now be engaging, and the kiddo would want to play this game. And if there were support in place, like we have in our research assistants are there with our participants and encouraging them, helping them to learn how to play the games. The whole idea is now this gamified, probably not all that exciting cognitive task is something that the individual will engage in consistently, and much like working out regularly, we hope that means that we're building, whether it's the attention or the working memory or the processing speed, the executive functions, etc.
Okay. And I know a lot of the computerized cognitive training that you publish on is done in school settings, and so what are some of the practical ways you've seen this research make a difference for the students?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you mentioned there that's the critical factor is that our work is within the school setting during the school day. So one of the amazing things that we've been able to do in terms of our work is in multiple school settings have the ability to integrate this cognitive training into the school day. And I think as a result, we have sort of this built-in ability to go, let's train skills in the setting in which those exact same skills are important, necessary, and in that sense, hopefully there is greater benefits associated with the skills, as opposed to a situation where a child might receive training in a different setting, but then we're hoping that training somehow comes back into the school setting to positively impact their academic performance, their academic experience. So for us, I think the whole idea was, let's try to work in the setting in which these skills are needed so that we have a greater likelihood of actually having an impact.
Okay, so really like the difference you're wanting to see is that these abilities are reflected in their school settings, like day to
Yeah,
day.
yeah, and I think, I think where that's especially clear is when we think about some of the students that we work with at the school for kids with learning differences. There is clearly some emerging evidence that as we do this cognitive training there, not only does it impact the working memory and the attention and the processing speed, but we also see that the training and the improvements are associated with specific reading related abilities, which is something that this school is focused on in terms of trying to grow for these kids because of their learning differences. So in that sense, there does seem to be this correspondence, this connection between being able to train in the schools and it facilitating and supporting this reading development that the school is really focused on trying to help these kids to develop.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Your research feels very grounded in what's actually happening in the classroom. So how do you ensure that your work stays connected to the real world educational needs?
I think a lot of that is driven by actually the school sites that we work with. Versus compared to a situation where someone is just interested in doing research and they have their own research goal and their specific hypotheses, and they just go into a setting, whether it's a school or some other setting, collect data and move on from there. I think what's different about our work, and I hope what contributes to our research assistants experience, is that much of the work that we do is actually driven by what the schools hope to achieve, hope to gain from our being there. So rather than just research that's driven by my particular research background and interest and so on and so forth, it's actually more a combination of what I'm interested in research-wise as well as what the school's interested in terms of a practical outcome. And I try to blend those things together in terms of the projects that we do in the school. So again, in that school where we have the students with the learning differences, well, they're very focused on how do we really help these kids with these learning atypicalities gain reading skills, writing skills, math skills that will allow them to be successful in high school. So we build our program around that. I think, as you know, at the community day schools that we're at, a huge interest of the principals and the administration, the school district administration, is how do we make sure that these students that are not likely to attend school on a regular basis are in fact attending school. And so we build the program around that, where as much as we're doing the cognitive training, as I've said many times to our research assistants and to you, the cognitive training is almost like a secondary thing. It's the research assistants' connection to the students who are participating that is really sort of the crucial outcome here, because that connection means that these high schoolers who might not otherwise come to school are actually coming to school because they want to be around the research assistants, and in that sense the cognitive training almost becomes secondary. It's a sort of a mechanism by which we can sort of be in the schools and say, hey, there's something going on, but it's really the connection between the research assistants and the student participants themselves that becomes the critical outcome.
So it really sounds like you as a researcher really take into account like the voices and needs, and taking the time to understand the voices and needs of the schools and even the students themselves. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a huge part of my work, in the sense that it's supposed to be this community university partnership where we're making very concrete connections between faculty expertise and community need. And so in that sense, yeah, it's a lot of collaboration as opposed to sort of unidirectional work where it's like, well, the faculty person just wants to do this and they happen to go do it in some setting. It's much more of a, what does the setting need? What are they looking for? How can this university faculty facilitate that?
Mm-hmm. So I know you just mentioned your collaboration with the different school districts. So I know you collaborate with San Bernardino and Orange County school districts. And so can you tell us what that looks like in practice? Like what kind of work are you doing with them?
Well, there's sort of work at two levels in both of the settings. There's obviously the day-to-day work where the cognitive training program's happening at one or more school sites with, in the case of the Orange County School, with the entirety of the school population, the students. So that's one part of the collaboration. And of course, that's where our graduates, undergraduates, RAs have direct contact with various things like the actual cognitive training that's going on, or with the testing that we do, so that we have the baselines and the post-test measures, and we get a sense of how the students are doing. So that's one level. The second level, where the students have, the RAs have much less of a direct connection, unless they're one of our lead RAs, is sort of at that administrative level, and the ongoing conversations that we have with on-site administrators like the principals or the administrative staff, and even in some cases the sort of district level administration, where we will share our results with the district level folks, and of course the hope there is that we show the impact of the program, that they continue to fund the program, etc. But for me, it's sort of working at those two levels, and mostly I'm at that second level, where the students, the RAs, are at that first level.
So now I'm just going to change a bit of gears and ask the questions about your teaching and advising. So I know you received like pretty incredible awards for those two areas, and so what's your approach to building connections and engagement in your classes?
I think for me, my teaching is always centered around being really accessible, or having the classroom feel accessible so that students can come in, and as much as they may have little background with exceptional students or with neuropsych assessment and so on, I can make it something that is relatable, make it something that they can feel comfortable engaging with, asking questions about. And I think in hopefully doing that, what students will then develop is a sense of comfort, not only in the classroom with the content, but then hopefully that means that they're good with stopping in during office hours, or making appointments and saying, I want to talk to you about something else, like grad school or a professional role, or whatever the case might be. And in that sense, sort of build the mentoring relationship, but via that classroom experience where they felt connected, and they felt welcomed, and they felt like they could ask questions, because that's usually, I think, where students will then develop that sense of, oh, I can go talk to this faculty person outside of class.
Thank you. So really, like, the key for you is really being accessible and supportive as possible for students? Yeah,
I think so. And obviously, you know, as much as I can, I try to keep up with you all, you know, in terms of where your lives are, because obviously your lives are in a different place than where I am professionally. So it's critical that I sort of have that sense of what is important to you, what is meaningful to you, and that's a lot of what I try to establish, not only in the classroom, but also outside the classroom.
And then our next question. So looking ahead, if you could change one thing about how school supports students' learning and emotional growth, what would it be?
I think schools are actually trying to do this. There are many schools that have incorporated this thing called social emotional learning into their curriculum. What hasn't happened, though, is unfortunately a solid understanding of what social emotional learning is among the teachers, among the administrators, so that this thing that they're incorporating actually makes a big impact. So if there is something that I could change, it would be that. It would be for us to get to a place where the teachers, the administrators, even the parents have a really solid understanding of the whole notion of social emotional development, social emotional learning, so that everybody is on the same page, so that when these amazing programs that support that are in fact implemented, that there's buy-in from the parents, the administrators, and the teachers, which obviously just means that as they now implement the program, there's a true impact in terms of the students. And ultimately, what we know is if there is that impact on the students, it means that they'll engage with school on a greater level. Typically, what that'll mean is they'll do better in terms of their academic performance and not dropping out and it actually advancing in school as opposed to not thinking about school as a valuable thing.
So what do you feel like are like the things that are keeping it from everybody kind of being on the same page of what exactly is social learning?
So historically, one of the big challenges with these new types of programs is just a reluctance to sort of move beyond the basic reading, writing, and math. And obviously, school is an experience where we're supposed to develop those core skills, right? We should leave school with reading, writing, and math skills that allow us to be functional as 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. And some of us obviously go on to college and things like that. But what I think we oftentimes forget is that those things don't happen as well if there aren't sort of these formative experiences way back here. For example, the social emotional growth. But this focus on the reading, writing, and math sort of pushes this other stuff that seems to be, just fluffy stuff to the side. But it's not fluffy stuff. It truly impacts where a kiddo is in terms of their intrapersonal abilities, and that makes a difference in terms of how these kiddos will actually engage with the learning process.
Okay. And so for our very last question, so a little birdie told me that you used to be a backup dancer for Boys to Men. How does your professional dancing experience relate to your role as a mentor and an educator?
Well, the little birdie is clearly wrong. There is no backup dancer history at all because this particular faculty member cannot dance. Now, this particular faculty member can dribble a basketball on a court and look coordinated, but don't put this person on a dance floor because it's not going to be pretty. But I think in terms of what backup dancers do with regard to a band and that integration among all those members to sort of create this amazing show that the audience sees, I think that part does apply to me in the sense of when I'm working with students, it's much more of a partnership. It's not, I try not to have it be sort of this top-down approach. That's the faculty person, that's the student. I try to have the student get to a place where they're truly contributing part of the mentorship and the advising that goes on, and whatever goal that we're trying to get to, that it's done together, as opposed to, it's just driven by this person telling the other person what to do, which I don't think is all that functional. But I think that's also why backup dancers work so well with the main performer. If they're really well integrated, the show's amazing, and you just sort of see the choreography that just works. And I try to do the same thing in terms of all the students that I work with.
And I'm sure the students very much appreciate feeling like it's a collaboration and they could voice out things as well.
We hope so.
Dr. Wong, you look like you could be a mean breakdown dancer or a backup dancer.
Yeah, no. I can guarantee you all that will not be happening. And if I were to try to start doing that, I'd probably end up in the ER or something.
So let me see if there's any questions. So I know Stacy asked ahead of time if anybody have any questions, but right now I'll move the floor over to you guys if you guys have any questions for Dr. Wong. So we'll just wait for a minute or two.
Okay.
We could take classes to learn how to break dance or something.
No, I'll just take those classes to race cars. Safer to do that than to go dance.
But once you hit retirement, you could have all the free time to do everything you like to do.
Yeah. So
afterwards, we could see you at the Super Bowl dancing.
No. You definitely won't be seeing that. I can assure you that will not happen.
Okay.
Can't even do the what is that, the karaoke? Even that's not a particularly good thing.
So we do have a question. What is the biggest challenge in getting connected with schools?
I think the biggest challenge in getting connected to schools is historically school settings have felt like they were just a place to facilitate someone else's work, and that they were not an integral part of that work. And so for me, I try to make sure that the schools understand their role in terms of what my research interests are and how they can benefit from the work that we would like to do. So for me, that's one of the things that I really emphasize and that I try to sort of maintain and really grow. And hopefully we've had success with that because we've been in the day schools for, I think, 15 years now. Wow. And with the Orange County School, though the current project is only 4 years old, there's been a connection to that school for probably about 15 years as well. And I think that's grown out of the fact that both of those settings know and understand that they're a valuable partner. Mm-hmm. And when schools don't know that, that's what makes it really hard to get into a school.
Okay, so you also feel like being able to maintain those connections is the school always feeling very valuable in that relationship and that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The first thing is that they feel like they can be a partner. And second thing is that they do in fact experience the process as being a partnership. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what I do in terms of being at the schools. Again, the RAs play that really, really critical role of having the actual programs work on a day-to-day basis. I have much less to do with that because most of my time is spent with the principals or the school district personnel and so on and so forth.
Okay. Let me check if anybody... what is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
My favorite thing about the work I do, I think, has most to do with the fact that there's I hope, a real impact. There's a direct connection, I hope, between what we're doing in terms of the kind of training and what the school's experience is in terms of teaching, as well as the students' experience in terms of their own academic experience. Being able to have that direct impact is sort of a focal point of what I do.
And what advice would you have for CSUSB students?
In terms of?
They didn't really specify in terms of what exactly, but I think just like from the top of your head, if you were meeting a student first off, what would be your biggest advice for them?
I think the biggest thing that I would suggest to students, much like with freshmen that I might meet at various orientations, is to not be afraid, to reach out. I mean, there's, of course, the courses that you're going to do, and you're going to have some kind of connection to faculty and instructors via those courses, right? You see each other a couple times a week at least, and there are whatever opportunities there are in the classroom. But I think one thing that I would just really highlight for students and push for students is reach out. Go beyond connecting with your faculty in the classroom. Within the child development group, there is just an amazing group of faculty that are highly accessible, that are incredibly student-oriented, and there's so much that students could get from just interacting, even if it's informally, with the faculty, that I would say go for it. As much as it's scary sometimes to think that you're doing that, I think once a student connects with a faculty in that out-of-classroom kind of setting, they actually find that the faculty aren't scary and that they're fun to talk with, and they get it, and they sort of understand where students are. And in that sense, it's something that I would really push students to do, regardless of whether they're just getting here or if it's something they just haven't done, though they've been here for a while.
Yes, I know, speaking as a student, building those connections with professors is what makes it even more encouraging to continue in school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question. What helped you pursue your career, and how did you know it was the perfect fit?
I think what was most helpful in terms of my pursuing my career was that UCLA experience and having those connections with faculty in a really, really sort of close-knit and tight group for 2 years. And so because we had those experiences, it was much easier for me to know what my next steps were. And I think that's where that interaction with faculty now for all of the students would be critical, right? Because we don't necessarily have the same opportunities here at Cal State to have an immersive 2-year program off campus, but there is the honors program, and beyond the honors program, there are the just ready accessibility of the faculty. So having those interactions really allows students, I think, to go, wow, this is what I could be doing, or here's an idea I never thought about that could be of interest to me professionally. So I think those become the critical things to sort of really encourage students to do, so that there is that opportunity to sort of engage and explore and to learn about things. And much like you, I mean, I know we've had many conversations, and it's sort of fun to see how your professional interests, your grad school interests have evolved, given your experience with the research program, given your experience in courses with me, and just our conversations. It's nice to see that growth, because I think you're sort of figuring out for yourself, this is who I want to be, and we're figuring out the path with which you can actually do that.
So you really feel like especially for your own experience, what was really critical in like defining your path was that early interactions from your undergrad?
Yeah, totally, because those faculty are the ones that sort of said, look, you can go do a doctoral, and we want you to go do a doctoral program, and their encouragement, their support, and at times their kicks in the butt to push me in that direction made all the difference in the world.
Let me see. Does anybody have any last minute questions you guys would like to ask Dr. Wong? We'll give them like 2 minutes to type their questions if they do have any.
Okay, while they're typing, hopefully y'all had a great spring break.
Passed by quick.
It passed by quick, but we'll just push through the last few weeks, and then we'll be at the end of this year.
There's only 3 weeks left? 4?
3, 4, yeah.
I think it's 4.
It's quick. It's a quick run to the end here.
Yes, spring is always like that.
Yep.
Okay. So I believe nobody else has any questions. So thank you so much, Dr. Wong, for taking the time to interview and talk a bit about yourself for our Child Development Department. And also thank you for everybody. Oh, somebody just asked a question actually. So what are your any plans for the summer?
Well, part of it is I'll be working. I've got summer classes that I'll be teaching. But beyond that, I think one of the things that I'll try to do during the summer, and there's a nice, I guess, wrap around to the first question. There are a number of dates set up to be on the track and driving during the summer, so that'll be my summer fun.
So you will be able to master that talent. So that means starting fall, you will be our race car driver.
As long as I don't crash too many cars.
Okay, well, please don't.
So hopefully we'll be on the track and doing some driving.
Sounds great. Okay, well, yes. So they said thank you, Dr. Wong. See you on the racetrack.
We're good. Anytime.
Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and taking the time to hear our interview with Dr. Wong. Enjoy the rest of your guys' day, and they're letting you know thank you for the great information. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your day. Okay, let me.